In the architecture of power, the most lethal mistakes are not those of incompetence, but those of misplaced brilliance. We begin our journey into the 48 laws with a principle that governs the very survival of the sovereign within a hierarchy. Never outshine the master. To the commoner, this law feels like an affront to meritocracy. The amateur believes that by displaying the full extent of his talents, he will naturally ascend the ranks. He seeks to be seen, to be admired, and to be valued. This is a catastrophic biological miscalculation. In the arena of high-status engagement, talent is a secondary currency. The primary currency is the security of the superior's ego. When you display a brilliance that overshadows those above you, you are not signaling competence. You are triggering a primal high-cortisol survival response in your master. You have become a status threat, and in the world of the elite, threats are neutralized, not rewarded. The sovereign understands the mirage of equality. Masters often project an aura of approachability, encouraging their subordinates to speak their minds and display their creativity. This is a threshold test. The amateur falls for the mirage, believing that the hierarchy has been suspended. He cracks jokes that are funnier than the master's, offers insights that are deeper, and displays a charisma that draws the room's attention away from the source of power. In doing so, he has violated the acoustic perimeter of the master. He has created a visual vacuum where the master used to be. The master, feeling his own status evaporating, will instinctively move to reclaim his territory. He will not credit your brilliance. He will find flaws in your character, undermine your projects, and eventually excise you from the grid entirely. You have won the moment, but lost the empire. To master this law, one must practice strategic concealment. True power is comfortable in the shadows. The sovereign realizes that to rise, one must first ensure the stability of the ladder. You make your master appear more brilliant than he is. You offer your best ideas as refinements of his own initial thoughts. You attribute your successes to his visionary guidance. By doing this, you are not being a sycophant, you are being an architect of security. When the master feels that your presence enhances his own luster rather than diminishing it, he will view you as an indispensable asset, a golden mirror that reflects his best self. In this state of safety, he will lift you higher, giving you access to the deeper chambers of power where your true work can begin. You are not shrinking your light, you are filtering it through the hierarchy to ensure your long-term survival. Furthermore, we must address the ego fragility of the Titan. The higher a person rises, the more they have to lose, and consequently, the more sensitive their status antennae become. A Titan's ego is a volatile environment. Even a subtle display of superior taste, a faster wit, or a more refined aesthetic can be perceived as an act of symbolic insurrection. The commoner, driven by his own need for validation, cannot help but leak his excellence. He wants the world to know he is the smartest person in the room. The sovereign, however, possesses the internal opacity to remain silent. You allow others to take the spotlight while you observe the underlying physics of the room. You realize that excessive brilliance is a form of social friction. By muting your resonance, you move through the hierarchy with zero resistance, like a ghost in the machine, accumulating influence while the master basks in the reflected glow of your silent labor. To truly integrate the first law of power into your biological and social circuitry, you must understand the neurochemistry of insecurity. When a master feels outshined, his brain doesn't process it as a loss of a debate, it processes it as a loss of territory. His cortisol levels spike, his amygdala triggers a fight or flight response, and you, the brilliant subordinate, are identified as the predator. The sovereign, therefore, does not just hide his talent, he re-engineers the master's internal environment. You must become the source of his dopamine. When he feels powerful, wise, and superior in your presence, his brain associates you with safety and reward. This is the foundation of the Gilded Mirror Protocol. You are not just a servant, you are the architect of his self-image. By meticulously crafting a version of reality where his brilliance is the sun and yours is merely a reflection, you gain the most valuable asset in the arena: unfiltered access. A critical tactic in this protocol is the art of the strategic flaw. If you are too perfect, too efficient, and too flawless, you create an aura of inevitability that terrifies those above you. They begin to wonder when you will stop serving and start taking. To neutralize this, the sovereign must occasionally display a harmless weakness. Perhaps you are bad with numbers while you secretly track every penny, or you possess a small social awkwardness that makes the master feel more sophisticated in comparison. This is not self-deprecation, it is status buffering. By giving the master a small area where he can feel superior to you, you provide him with the ego oxygen he needs to stay calm. This controlled vulnerability creates a psychological shield around you, allowing you to build your empire in the background while the master is busy fixing your minor flaws. You have turned his ego into your greatest protector. Furthermore, we must examine the Galileo paradox. History is littered with brilliant minds who fell because they forgot the physics of the hierarchy. When Galileo presented his astronomical findings, he did not merely present data, he presented a reality that made the masters of the time look ignorant. He won the intellectual battle, but lost his freedom. The sovereign would have approached this differently. He would have presented the data as the master's hidden intuition finally proven by science. He would have framed the brilliance as a legacy of the hierarchy, not a challenge to it. In your own career or social circle, when you achieve a breakthrough, you must resist the primal urge to claim it. Instead, engage in credit transference. Use phrases like, "Following your earlier suggestion about X, I found that," or "Inspired by your vision of Y, this result became possible." You are feeding the master's need for legacy, and in return, he will grant you the authority to execute your next move. This leads us to the courtier's silence. In a meeting where high-status individuals are present, the amateur feels the need to contribute to prove his worth. He speaks up, corrects a minor error the master made, or offers a more elegant solution. This is a status leak. Each time you correct a superior, you are making a withdrawal from your power bank. The sovereign understands the lethality of silence. If the master makes a mistake, you do not correct him in public. You wait for a private moment, and even then you frame the correction as a question of clarification. You say, "I was reflecting on your brilliant point about X, and I wondered how we should handle this small variable." You are allowing him to discover the correction himself. This preserves his dignity while ensuring the project's success. You are the silent engine that keeps the ship on course, while he remains the visible captain. Moreover, we must discuss the long game pivot. This law is not a life sentence of submission, it is a strategic phase. You practice never outshining while you are still accumulating the resources, the network, and the leverage necessary for independent sovereignty. You are like a plant growing in the shade of a massive oak tree. The tree protects you from the wind and the sun while you strengthen your roots. But the moment you have achieved critical mass, when your power is no longer dependent on the hierarchy, the law shifts. However, even then, the sovereign does not rebel with noise. He simply outgrows the master. You move into a new arena where you are the master. The amateur turns his former master into an enemy through a sudden display of superiority. The sovereign turns his former master into an ally or an emeritus through a graceful transition. You maintain the gaze of respect even as you transcend the hierarchy. Finally, we must internalize the biological humility of power. True sovereignty is so dense that it doesn't need to be broadcasted. Only the insecure need to shine constantly. When you are truly powerful, you find a dark, cold pleasure in being underestimated. You enjoy the fact that the room thinks the master is the genius, while you are the one who pulled the strings. This hidden dominance is the ultimate psychological high. It is the sovereign's secret. By the time they realize you are the most powerful person in the grid, it is already too late for them to stop you. You have used their own egos as a blindfold. You have mastered the physics of the hierarchy not by fighting it, but by flowing through it, ensuring that every master you serve becomes a stepping stone to the throne you are building in the silence. As we conclude this first part of the 48 laws, reflect on the masters in your life. Are you triggering their cortisol or feeding their dopamine? Are you a status threat or a security asset? The crown is not won through a loud revolution, but through the silent accumulation of influence under the cover of another's shadow. Master the first law, and you secure the foundation of your empire. Fail it, and your journey ends before it begins. In the next part, we will move to the second law. Never put too much trust in friends. Learn how to use enemies. We will explore why loyalty is a myth of the commoner and why utility is the only currency of the elite. In the construction of an empire, the most dangerous structural flaw is not a powerful enemy, but a weak foundation built on the myth of loyalty. We move now into the second law of power, a principle that requires the sovereign to perform a cold, clinical amputation of sentimentalism. The common man is a slave to his friends. He hires them, confides in them, and promotes them, believing that a shared history or emotional bond is a substitute for professional utility. This is a catastrophic strategic error. Friendship is a volatile, high-cortisol environment driven by the biophysics of envy. When you promote a friend, you are not creating an ally, you are creating a status conflict. The sovereign understands that in the arena of power, the only stable currency is utility. Loyalty is a byproduct of mutual benefit, not a relic of shared memories. To master this law, you must learn to view your social circle through the lens of a predator. Who provides the most value and who possesses the least potential for betrayal? The tragedy of friendship in power lies in the inevitability of envy. When you rise above your peers, the biological reality of the hierarchy begins to poison the friendship. Your friend, who once viewed you as an equal, must now look up at you. This triggers a deep, often unconscious resentment. They see your success as an indictment of their own failure. Because they know your commoner origins, they do not view your elevation as earned, they view it as luck. This familiarity makes them dangerous. A friend knows your weaknesses, your past mistakes, and your status leaks. They have the keys to your internal fortress. When the pressure rises, a friend will often betray you not out of malice, but out of a desperate need to re-establish the mirage of equality. They will undermine you with subtle gossip or slow-walk your directives, all while smiling to your face. The sovereign, therefore, keeps his friends for leisure, but never for labor. You do not build your palace with those who remember you as a child. You build it with those who respect you as a monarch.
Contrast this with the potential of the enemy. To the amateur, an enemy is a threat to be destroyed. To the sovereign, an enemy is a high-value asset waiting to be activated. When you hire or promote a former adversary, you are engaging in behavioral alchemy. An enemy has everything to prove and a debt of survival to pay. Because they have seen your strength and felt your pressure, they have no illusions of equality. Their loyalty is not based on the fragile ground of emotion, but on the solid rock of gratitude and redemption. A former enemy will often work 10 times harder than a friend because they know that their survival depends on their utility. They're not blinded by familiarity, they are focused by the hierarchy. By converting an enemy into an ally, you are not just gaining a soldier, you are neutralizing a threat and signaling your absolute sovereignty to the rest of the grid. You are showing the world that you are so powerful that you can consume your opposition and turn it into fuel for your own expansion. Furthermore, we must address the paradox of professional distance. In a high-status environment, the closer someone is to you emotionally, the lesser your authority over them becomes. When you hire a friend, you lose the ability to provide direct correction. If they fail, your attempt to discipline them is seen as a personal betrayal. You become a hostage to their feelings. The sovereign, however, operates within a utility vacuum. You choose your associates based on their functional excellence and their strategic alignment. By maintaining a degree of professional distance, you ensure that the relationship remains governed by results, not by social comfort. This distance is your protection. It allows you to be objective, to be decisive, and if necessary, to be ruthless. You realize that a useful enemy is 1,000 times more valuable than a useless friend. In the architecture of power, sentiment is the rust that destroys the machine. Moreover, the sovereign understands that trust is a luxury for the commoner. In the elite circles, we do not trust, we verify incentives. When you ask why someone is loyal to you, the answer should never be, because we are friends. The answer must be, because it is in their absolute best interest to be loyal. You must engineer the environment so that betrayal is too expensive for the other person to afford. This is the incentive anchor. Friends are unpredictable because their incentives are often clouded by emotional shifts. Enemies, however, are predictable. They want survival, they want power, and they want to avoid the consequences of their previous opposition. By aligning their need for redemption with your strategic goals, you create a bond that is stronger than any childhood oath. You are not building a social club. You are building a sovereign grid where every node is held in place by the gravity of mutual advantage. To achieve total sovereignty, you must master the most painful maneuver in the pursuit of power, the emotional amputation. This is the deliberate process of severing the professional ties that bind you to your friends. The common man finds this repulsive. His biological wiring demands social safety and the comfort of the familiar. But the sovereign realizes that a friend in a professional position is a status parasite that feeds on your shared history to bypass your current authority. When you begin to rise, you must execute the utility audit. You must look at every person in your inner circle and ask, if I met this person for the first time today, would I hire them based on their skills alone? If the answer is no, then their presence in your empire is a sentimental leak. You must distance yourself, not out of cruelty, but out of a commitment to the standard of excellence. By removing the cloud of friendship, you restore transactional clarity to your operations. You are no longer managing feelings, you are managing outcomes. This leads us to the paradox of the entitlement trap. A friend feels that because they knew you when you were nobody, they are entitled to a piece of your somebody. They expect leniency, they expect shortcuts, and they expect your constant validation. This creates a gravity of mediocrity that pulls your entire organization downward. The sovereign, however, prefers the redemption arc of the enemy. An enemy knows he has no emotional credit with you. He starts at a deficit. This creates a powerful psychological drive in him to over-deliver. Every successful task he completes is a brick in the wall of his new identity as your ally. While the friend is busy asking, "What have you done for me lately?" the former enemy is busy asking, "How can I prove my worth to you today?" This shift in focus is the difference between an empire that stagnates and an empire that expands. You are not looking for someone to love you, you are looking for someone to serve the vision with clinical precision. Furthermore, we must discuss the test of the sacrificial play. When you convert an enemy or bring a new utility-based associate into your grid, you must never grant them absolute trust immediately. You must deploy a controlled vulnerability test. You provide them with a low-stakes secret or a simulated opportunity for betrayal. You watch their response through the lens of a predator. If they use the information to serve your interests, they have passed the first stage of the utility bond. If they attempt to leverage it for their own gain, you have identified a status infection before it could reach your vital organs. This is the biosecurity of the sovereign. You do not leave your loyalty to chance. You engineer situations that force the truth to the surface. You realize that a verified enemy is far safer than an unverified friend.
The sovereign also understands the isolation of the crown. There is a visceral loneliness that comes with law too. To prioritize utility over friendship is to move into a colder, more analytical state of existence. The commoner fears this loneliness. He would rather be liked and weak than respected and solitary. But the sovereign recognizes that this isolation is a tactical shield. When you are not emotionally dependent on anyone, no one can hold your presence hostage. Your decisions are not clouded by the fear of hurting a friend's feelings. You are free to move with the unflinching decisiveness required to dominate the arena. You accept the cost of the crown because you realize that the social comfort of the amateur is a cage that prevents the birth of the monarch. Your friends are for the banquet hall. Your associates and former enemies are for the war room. Moreover, we must master the art of the graceful exit. When you distance yourself from a friend who is no longer useful, you do not do it with noise or conflict. The sovereign uses atmospheric cooling. You slowly withdraw the emotional subsidy you have been providing. You become more formal, more focused on the work, and less available for social leakage. Eventually, the friend will realize that the equality mirage has ended and will drift away on their own. This prevents the creation of a spiteful enemy. You are not firing a friend, you are simply realigning the hierarchy. By the time they are gone, your empire is so stable and your new allies, the former enemies, are so loyal that the loss is felt as a structural optimization rather than a personal tragedy. You have successfully navigated the most dangerous social transition in the journey of power. Finally, we must internalize the physics of the predator. In the wild, animals do not associate based on shared history, they associate based on mutual survival. A pack of wolves is a utility grid. They move together because it is the only way to bring down the elk. The moment a member becomes a liability, the pack moves on. As a sovereign, you are the leader of the pack. Your loyalty belongs to the empire, not to the individuals within it. When you learn to use enemies, you are adding new DNA to your organization, DNA that is hardened by conflict and driven by the need for survival. You are turning the energy of opposition into the engine of progress. You have mastered the second law, not by becoming heartless, but by becoming purpose-driven. You have traded the fragile ties of the past for the iron chains of mutual interest. As we conclude this second part of the 48 laws, reflect on the friends you are currently carrying. Are they assets or are they anchors? Look at the enemies you have pushed away. Is there a high-utility warrior among them waiting for the chance to serve you? The sovereign does not seek a social club, he seeks a machine of victory. Master the second law, and you ensure that your foundation is made of steel, not of sentiment. In the next part, we will move to the third law, conceal your intentions. We will explore the smoke and mirrors of the elite and why the honest man is the easiest man to destroy in the arena of power. In the arena of absolute power, transparency is not a virtue, it is a tactical suicide. We move now into the third law, the art of strategic obscurity. The common man is a slave to his own honesty. He believes that by being open, authentic, and clear about his goals, he is building trust. This is a profound biological misunderstanding. To the sovereign, an open book is an easy target. When you broadcast your intentions, you are giving your adversaries the blueprint to your destruction. You allow them to build defenses, to engineer countermoves, and to anticipate your rhythm. To master this law, you must realize that silence is your shield and misdirection is your sword. You must become a master of smoke and mirrors, ensuring that by the time people realize what you are doing, you have already secured the throne.
The first pillar of concealment is the lure of the honest mask. Most people cannot handle the psychological pressure of keeping a secret. It creates an internal tension, a cortisol leak that they try to relieve by sharing their plans. The amateur wants to be understood and admired for his vision. The sovereign, however, realizes that mystery is a form of gravity. By saying less than necessary and keeping your true goals in the dark chamber of your mind, you force others to speculate. This speculation is your greatest ally. When people are busy trying to guess your intentions, they are not focused on their own strategies. You have effectively hijacked their cognitive bandwidth. You are the one who is acting, while they are the ones who are reacting to a ghost. Furthermore, we must master the strategy of the red herring. Concealing your intentions is not just about staying silent, it is about active misdirection. If you are simply mysterious, you trigger suspicion. But if you provide a fake target, a false goal that looks plausible, you lead your adversaries into a dead end. This is the decoy protocol. You might talk loudly about a project you have no intention of finishing, or display a sudden interest in a territory you don't actually want. Your rivals will rush to block you in that direction, wasting their resources and energy. Meanwhile, you are quietly moving toward your true objective in the opposite direction. You are the predator that mimics the sound of a harmless bird to draw the prey into the open. By the time they see the blade, the game is already over. This leads us to the smokescreen of the mundane. The most effective way to hide a lethal intention is to wrap it in a boring exterior. The commoner tries to look powerful or mysterious, which draws the wrong kind of attention. The sovereign, instead, practices behavioral camouflage. You appear predictable. You follow the standard social scripts.
You engage in small talk and display a generic persona. This is your smokescreen. When you look like everyone else, nobody suspects you of having a grand design. Your excellence is hidden beneath the veneer of the ordinary. This is the Trojan horse strategy. You enter the fortress not as a warrior, but as a gift. While your adversaries are comforted by your apparent mediocrity, you are gathering the data and the leverage necessary to dismantle their hierarchy from the inside. Moreover, we must address the bio-sovereignty of the poker face. In a high-stakes interaction, your body is a broadcasting station of intent. If you are excited about a move, your pupils dilate, your voice rises, and your gestures become more expansive. These are biological leaks that any experienced sovereign can read. To master Law 3, you must cultivate an emotional opacity. You must learn to decouple your internal state from your external projection. You can be at war internally while projecting a Zen-like stillness. This physical disconnect is terrifying to others because it makes you unreadable. When they cannot find a biological hook in your behavior, they lose their sense of certainty. You have created a presence vacuum, and in that vacuum, you are the only one who can navigate with precision. Finally, we must understand the lethality of the sudden move. Power is most effective when it is sudden and inevitable. If you reveal your intentions too early, you allow for a negotiated resistance. You give the world time to talk you out of your vision or to find a way to compromise your goals. The sovereign, however, believes in the strategic ambush. You maintain the shadow until the very last second. When the moment of critical mass is reached, you move with a speed and weight that leaves no room for counteraction. You don't argue for your place, you occupy it. The shock of your sudden manifestation is so great that it paralyzes the opposition. You have turned your concealment into a force multiplier. You have mastered the third law, not by being a liar, but by being an architect of information, controlling what the world sees until the world has no choice but to accept your reality.
To master the third law of power, you must graduate from simple silence to the more sophisticated art of active misdirection. The common man believes that to hide a secret, he must be quiet. The sovereign knows that to hide a secret, he must be loud about something else. This is the smokescreen protocol. It is the ability to create a vivid, distracting reality that consumes the attention of your rivals, while you operate in the visual blind spot they have created for themselves. The most effective smokescreen is not a lie, but a sacrificial truth. By being remarkably honest and transparent about a minor, low-stakes matter, you establish a baseline of trust in the minds of others. When you admit to a small mistake or share a personal but harmless vulnerability, you are performing a biological hack on the observer. Their brain labels you as an honest actor, and once that label is fixed, their defensive guard drops. They stop looking for the hidden agenda because they believe they have already seen your true self. You have used the light of a small candle to blind them to the bonfire you are building in the darkness. Furthermore, we must address the tactic of the false trail. In the high-stakes professional grid, people are always looking for a pattern. They want to know your next move. The sovereign provides them with a pattern that is perfectly logical, yet entirely false. This is strategic predictability. You behave in a way that suggests a specific intention for weeks or even months. You drop subtle clues that point toward a target A. Your adversaries, feeling clever, will begin to move their pieces to block target A. They will invest their capital, their time, and their social influence to neutralize a threat that doesn't exist. While they are busy celebrating their strategic victory over your decoy, you strike at target B with the full weight of your resources. By the time they realize the pattern was a hallucination you created, you have already occupied the territory. You have turned their own intelligence into a cage. This leads us to the mundane shield. The greatest masters of power do not look like masters of power. They look like the most ordinary people in the room. This is social camouflage. The amateur feels the need to look elite, which triggers the status antennae of every predator in the environment. The sovereign, instead, masters the art of the boring persona. You engage in the generic rituals of the commoner. You discuss the weather. You offer conventional opinions, and you display an average level of ambition in public settings. By blending into the background noise of the organization, you become invisible to the hierarchy. No one fears the man who seems content with the mundane. This invisibility is your greatest tactical advantage. It allows you to move through the grid of power without resistance. While the loud alphas are busy fighting each other for the spotlight, you are quietly accumulating the keys to the kingdom. Moreover, we must understand the bio-sovereignty of the poker face. To conceal your intentions effectively, you must decouple your internal intensity from your external projection. The commoner leaks his intent through his micro-expressions, the tightening of the jaw, the sudden shift in eye contact, or the subtle increase in speech tempo when he is close to a goal. These are cortisol flares that broadcast your moves to the room. The sovereign practices emotional neutrality. You maintain the same steady, evaluative gaze, whether you are discussing a lunch menu or a million-dollar acquisition. This internal coldness is not a lack of emotion, but a total command of the biological frame. When your adversaries cannot find a pulse in your behavior, they become anxious. They begin to project their own fears onto you, making mistakes and revealing their own intentions in a desperate attempt to read yours. You have become the mirror of their insecurity. This concealment must be applied with surgical precision in your professional life. When you are working on a major project or a career-defining move, the urge to share your vision with colleagues or friends will be intense. This is the dopamine trap. Your brain wants the reward of being admired before the work is done. You must starve this urge. Every time you share a piece of your intention, you are diluting your power. You are giving the status parasites in your environment a chance to sabotage you, to compete with you, or to steal your credit. The sovereign keeps his vision in the sanctum of silence. You only reveal the move when it is inevitable. When you finally step into the light, it is not to propose an idea, but to announce a reality. The shock of your sudden manifestation is a form of psychological dominance that leaves the opposition with no time to coordinate a defense. Finally, we must internalize the physics of the shadow. In the wild, the predator that is seen is the predator that goes hungry. Power is most effective when it is submerged. By concealing your intentions, you are not being dishonest in a petty sense. You are being strategically superior. You are protecting your vision from the friction of the common world. You are allowing your goals to grow in the rich soil of secrecy until they are strong enough to withstand the sun. You have mastered the third law, not because you fear the world, but because you respect the power of information. You are the ghost in the machine, the architect of the mirage, and the silent hand that moves the world while the world is busy looking at the smoke you have provided. As we conclude this third part of the 48 laws, reflect on the plans you have shared lately. Who did you tell? Why did you tell them? Was it for advantage or was it for validation? The sovereign realizes that validation is the poison of ambition. Master the third law, and you become a solid object in a world of shadows. In the next part, we will move to the fourth law, always say less than necessary. We will explore the gravity of the few words and why the man who speaks too much is a man who has already surrendered his crown.
In the architecture of high-status presence, words are not merely tools for communication, they are units of sovereign currency. Every word you utter is expenditure of your presence, and the more you spend, the less each individual unit is worth. We move now into the fourth law of power, the principle of linguistic economy. The common man is a slave to the acoustic void. He feels a frantic biological need to fill the silence, believing that by talking more, he is controlling the room. This is a profound status leak. When you talk too much, you inevitably say something foolish, reveal a vulnerability, or broadcast your internal anxiety. The sovereign, however, realizes that silence is a form of gravity. By saying less than necessary, you appear more powerful, more mysterious, and more in control of the frame. You are not just saving breath, you are accumulating authority. The first pillar of this law is the neutralization of the validation urge. Why do people talk excessively? It is a cortisol-driven response. They are seeking the dopamine of approval. They want the room to nod, to smile, and to validate their existence. The amateur explains himself because he is afraid of being misunderstood. The sovereign, however, possesses the internal stillness to be comfortable with being a mystery. You realize that you do not owe the world an explanation for your vision or your actions. When you deliver a statement and then stop, you are creating a psychological vacuum. This vacuum forces the other person to fill the air, often leading them to reveal their own intentions, their fears, and their weaknesses. You have turned your silence into a strategic probe. You are the one observing, while they are the one being audited by the silence you have created. Furthermore, we must address the lethality of the short statement. In the world of the elite, brevity is a signal of biological certainty. A long, winding explanation suggests that you are trying to sell an idea or convince someone of your worth. A short, downward-inflecting statement suggests that the reality you are describing is inevitable. Think of the difference between a supplicant begging for a favor and a monarch issuing a decree. The monarch does not provide a list of justifications, he states the outcome and remains silent. This oracle effect makes your words feel like predestined truths. When you speak less, each word carries the weight of a mountain. People listen more intently because they know that your acoustic perimeter is guarded. They value your input because it is a scarcity asset. You have mastered the art of being the still center of the social storm. This leads us to the bio-sovereignty of the unreadable frame. To the commoner, a person who doesn't talk is dangerous or intimidating.
This is because human beings are biologically hardwired to read others through their speech and expressions. When you withhold your words, you are withholding the data points they need to categorize you. You become an unknown variable. This lack of data creates a subtle, persistent pressure on the adversary's nervous system. They begin to project their own insecurities onto your silence. If they are hiding something, they assume you know it. If they are afraid of failure, they assume you are judging them. By staying silent, you are letting their own minds do the work of undermining their confidence. You have turned your linguistic economy into a weapon of psychological attrition. Moreover, we must understand the gravity of the sovereign pause. The common man fears the gap between sentences. He rushes to the next word to avoid the awkwardness. The sovereign, however, owns the gap. You use the pause as a frame anchor. When someone asks you a high-stakes question, you do not answer immediately. You take a sovereign beat. You look them in the eyes with a steady, evaluative gaze, and you wait. This pause signals that you are the master of your own time. It tells the room that you are not reacting to the question, but processing it from a position of power. By the time you speak, the room is in a state of acoustic hunger. Your answer, no matter how short, will be consumed as if it were the ultimate solution.
You are not just talking. You are governing the frequency of the interaction. Finally, we must internalize the physics of the status leak. Every time you over-explain, justify your decisions, or engage in filler speech, you are leaking status. You are telling the hierarchy that you are uncomfortable with the space you are occupying. The sovereign practices linguistic austerity. You treat your words as if they were gold bullion, precious, heavy, and only to be moved when necessary. You realize that he who speaks the least usually owns the most. In the arena of power, silence is not the absence of sound. It is the presence of absolute control. You have mastered the fourth law not because you are shy, but because you are strategically saturated. You are the black hole of the social grid, infinite in mass, silent in nature, and inescapable in influence. To reach the final stage of linguistic sovereignty, you must master the most predatory tool in the elite's arsenal, the acoustic vacuum of extraction. In high-stakes negotiations or social confrontations, the person who speaks first after a proposal or a question is usually the one who surrenders the frame. The common man fears the dead air of a meeting. He feels a desperate, biological urge to fill the silence with justifications, explanations, or concessions. He believes he is smoothing things over, but in reality, he is leaking value. The sovereign, however, uses the dark pause as a psychological pry bar. When you make a request or stated a difficult truth, you stop. You don't soften it with more words. You let the silence hang in the air like a physical weight. The other person's nervous system, unable to handle the status vacuum you have created, will eventually crack. They will start talking to relieve their own anxiety, and in that frantic stream of words, they will reveal their true limits, their hidden fears, and the concessions they were hoping to keep secret. Your silence has become an internal auditor for their mind. Furthermore, we must address the armor of the few words.
In the arena of power, every word you speak is a potential handle for your enemies to grab onto. The more you talk, the more data points you provide about your internal map, your biases, your insecurities, and your future moves. The sovereign realizes that transparency is vulnerability. By practicing extreme linguistic austerity, you are effectively closing the gates of your fortress. When you do speak, you use sovereign fragments, short, downward inflecting phrases that provide zero emotional data. Phrases like, "I see," "interesting," or "explain the logic" are powerful because they put the burden of performance back onto the other person. You are not giving information, you are extracting it. You have turned your presence into a black box. Everyone knows there is immense power inside,
but no one can find the key to open it. This leads us to the trap of the smartest man in the room. The amateur is often undone by his own intelligence. He wants the world to know how clever he is, so he explains the intricacies of his plans, corrects others' minor errors, and dominates the conversation with his brilliance. This is a high-energy, low-status behavior. It tells the room that your ego is still hungry for validation. The sovereign, however, possesses the submerged intelligence. You realize that true power is most effective when it is underestimated. You allow others to talk, to brag, and to display their knowledge. While they are busy seeking the spotlight, you are gathering intelligence. By saying less than necessary, you are letting them exhaust their ammunition. By the time you finally speak, you possess a complete map of the room's psychological terrain. Your few words will be surgical and final because they are backed by the weight of your silent observation. Moreover, we must master the sovereign's oracle tone. When you restrict the quantity of your speech, the quality and aura of your voice must increase.
You do not speak from the throat. You speak from the resonant chest. You ensure that every sentence is a solid object. No filler words, no upward inflections, and no apologetic pacing. This is the gravity of scarcity. Because you speak so rarely, the room assumes that when you do, it is because something of absolute importance is about to manifest. You have trained the environment to hush when your lips move. This acoustic dominance is more effective than any shout or aggressive gesture. You have mastered the fourth law, not by being quiet, but by making your speech so rare and so heavy that it becomes the center of gravity for the entire interaction. Finally, we must internalize the physics of the unflinching gaze. Silence is only a weapon if it is paired with a sovereign visual anchor. The commoner looks away when he stops talking, signaling his own discomfort with the silence he has created. The sovereign, instead, maintains a steady evaluative gaze throughout the pause. You look the other person directly in the eyes, not with aggression, but with a neutral curiosity. You are watching their reaction as if they were a biological specimen under a microscope. This combination of linguistic stillness and visual depth creates a psychological pressure that is almost impossible to resist. You have moved beyond the communication of ideas into the projection of will. You are the sovereign of the moment, and the world must wait in the silence you have provided until you choose to release it. As we conclude this fourth part of the 48 laws, reflect on the linguistic leaks you have permitted in the past. Where did you say too much? Where did you try to sell yourself to someone who wasn't buying? The sovereign realizes that words are for the subjects, silence is for the monarch. Master the fourth law, and you ensure that your presence is felt as a gravitational force long after you have left the room. In the next part, we will move to the fifth law. So much depends on reputation. Guard it with your life. We will explore why perception is reality in the arena of power, and how to build a reputation that precedes you like a shield of iron.
In the ruthless geography of the elite, you do not exist as a flesh and blood human being. You exist as a perception. We move now into the fifth law of power, the principle of reputational sovereignty. The common man is obsessed with authenticity. He wants the world to see him for who he truly is, flaws and all. This is a profound strategic failure. To the sovereign, authenticity is a liability. Your true self is a private matter, but your reputation is a public weapon. It is the psychological force field that precedes you into every room, determining the outcome of an interaction before you have even opened your mouth. If your reputation is one of unshakable strength, your enemies will retreat without a fight. If it is one of cunning, they will hesitate to cross you. To master this law, you must realize that perception is the only reality that matters in the arena of power. The first pillar of this law is the establishment of the single lethal trait. Most people have a blurred reputation. They are known for many small things, but nothing substantial. They are nice, hardworking, or reliable, generic labels that carry zero gravitational weight. The sovereign, instead, anchors his reputation on a singular pillar of power. You choose one quality, be it absolute decisiveness, cold strategic brilliance, or unwavering loyalty to allies, and you magnify it until it becomes your social signature.
This clarity of perception creates a biological cortisol trigger in your adversaries. When they hear your name, their nervous system should instinctively signal that they are dealing with a solid object. By being known for one specific, formidable trait, you simplify the world's decision-making process. They either align with you or they get out of your way. Furthermore, we must address the reputation as a force multiplier. A powerful reputation is the ultimate energy saver. In the common world, you have to prove your worth in every single interaction. You have to argue, negotiate, and struggle for every inch of respect. This is an exhausting expenditure of biological capital. The sovereign, however, uses his reputation to do the heavy lifting. When your reputation for excellence is established, people will fill in the blanks in your favor.
They will assume you are smarter than you are, more prepared than you are, and more powerful than you are. This is the halo effect of sovereignty. You are no longer fighting for status. You are simply occupying the status that your reputation has already secured. You have turned your public ghost into a soldier that fights your battles while you remain in the stillness of your command. This leads us to the biosovereignty of the preemptive strike. A fearsome reputation is a form of psychological deterrence. In the animal kingdom, the predator with the loudest roar or the most vibrant colors often avoids conflict because the cost of engagement for the prey is too high. In the human arena, your reputation serves the same purpose. If you are known to be ruthless in defense of your frame, others will naturally self-censor their aggression around you. They will think twice before challenging your ideas or testing your boundaries. You have effectively policed their behavior without saying a word. Your reputation has created a buffer of respect around your presence, ensuring that your energy is preserved for high-value strategic moves rather than petty social skirmishes. Moreover, we must understand the lethality of the reputational leak. A reputation is a fortress, and like any fortress, a single crack can lead to a total collapse. The amateur is careless with his public image. He engages in low-status gaffes, associates with status parasites, or displays emotional volatility in public. Each of these acts is a leak that diminishes his gravitational pull. The sovereign practices vigilant image management. You realize that every public action is a data point that either strengthens or weakens your shield. You do not leave your reputation to chance or the opinions of others. You actively curate the information that enters the social grid. You are the chief architect of your own myth. You understand that once a reputation for weakness or indecision takes root, it is almost impossible to excise. Therefore, you guard your reputation not out of vanity, but as if your very survival depends on it, because in the arena of power, it does. Finally, we must internalize the physics of the shadow war. When you are building your reputation, you must also be prepared to sabotage the perception of your rivals. Power is a zero-sum game of attention.
By subtly casting doubt on the reputation of an adversary, pointing out an inconsistency, a moment of panic, or a lack of depth, you are effectively devaluing their presence. This is not about petty gossip. It is about strategic contrast. You make your solid ground look even more stable by highlighting the quicksand beneath their feet. You have mastered the fifth law when you realize that your reputation is not just about what people think of you, but about the psychological territory you occupy in the collective subconscious of the hierarchy. You are the inevitable force, and your reputation is the shadow that darkens the path of anyone who dares to stand in your way. To reach the pinnacle of reputational sovereignty, you must learn not only how to build your own fortress, but also how to identify the structural weaknesses in the fortresses of your adversaries. This is the surgical sabotage of the rival's shield. In the zero-sum game of status, the easiest way to elevate your own standing is to diminish the standing of those who compete for the same psychological territory. However, the sovereign never engages in petty slander. Low-status individuals attack with insults and direct accusations, which only makes them look bitter and reactive, a cortisol-leaking behavior that damages their own reputation more than the target's. The sovereign attacks with subtle contrast. You don't call your rival a liar. You simply highlight your own unwavering transparency in a way that makes their inconsistency visible.
You use the satirical needle, poking a small, precise hole in their most prized trait. If they are known for their wisdom, you point out a single glaring oversight they made, framing it as surprising for someone of their stature. This seed of doubt is more lethal than 1,000 insults. You have introduced infection into their perception grid, and once the public begins to question one trait, the entire shield begins to crumble.
Furthermore, we must address the protocol of reputational recovery. Even a sovereign may face a direct hit to his reputation. In the common world, the reaction to an attack is defensiveness. The amateur rushes to explain, apologize, and justify his actions. This is a catastrophic strategic error. Defensiveness is a signal of guilt and weakness. It tells the hierarchy that the attack has penetrated your armor. The sovereign, instead, practices atmospheric stillness. When your reputation is attacked, you do not engage with the attacker. You increase the density of your presence. You double down on the very traits that made you formidable. If you are accused of being cold, become the unshakable iceberg. If you are accused of being ambitious, become the manifested visionary. By refusing to acknowledge the attack, you deprive it of the attention oxygen it needs to survive. You treat the slander as background noise, irrelevant to the sovereign frequency. Eventually, the world will mirror your own indifference, and the attack will be seen as a desperate act of a low-status parasite. This leads us to the digital sovereignty of the grid. In the year 2026, your reputation is no longer just in the minds of people you meet, it is encoded in the digital narrative of the world. The sovereign manages his digital ghost with clinical precision. Every post, every profile, and every digital footprint is a status anchor. You do not post, you broadcast intent. You realize that the internet never forgets a status leak. Therefore, you ensure that your digital presence is an extension of your physical sovereignty, minimalist, high quality, and echoing your singular pillar of power. You do not engage in digital arguments or low-status trends. You remain the silent authority of the grid. By controlling the information that is searchable about you, you ensure that anyone who audits your reputation before meeting you is already in a state of preempted submission. Moreover, we must understand the alchemy of the scandal. Sometimes a controlled scandal can actually strengthen a reputation if it reinforces your core power trait. If your reputation is built on unapologetic dominance, then a scandal that shows you being too aggressive actually serves as a warning to your enemies. It adds texture to your myth. The sovereign knows how to lean into the storm. You do not seek to be liked by the masses. You seek to be respected by the elite. If a scandal erupts, you ask, does this make me look weak or does it make me look dangerous? If it makes you look dangerous, you hold your ground. You embrace the role of the necessary villain if it secures your territory. You realize that a reputation for being kind is a cage, but a reputation for being effectively formidable is a throne. Finally, we must internalize the physics of the legend. A reputation becomes a legend when it survives the test of time and crisis. To achieve this, you must practice consistency dominance. You do not change your sovereign frequency to fit the season. You remain a solid object in a liquid world. When people can predict your strength, they begin to rely on it. Your reputation moves from being a topic of conversation to being an environmental fact. You are the mountain that does not move, regardless of the weather. By guarding your reputation with your life, you are not protecting your ego. You are protecting your legacy. You are ensuring that even when you are not in the room, your presence continues to govern the hierarchy. You have turned your name into a sovereign command. As we conclude this fifth part of the 48 laws, look at the public ghost you have created. Does it protect you or does it expose you? Is it an iron shield or is it a paper mask? The sovereign realizes that power is 10% action and 90% perception. Master the fifth law and you become inevitable. Fail it, and you remain a commoner fighting for scraps of respect in the mud. In the next part, we will move to the sixth law, court attention at all costs. We will explore why invisibility is death in the arena of power, and how to draw the world's eye toward your sovereignty without looking like a desperate seeker of approval.
In the cold, digital, and physical landscape of the 21st century, there is one sin more lethal than failure, more permanent than mistake, and more corrosive than defeat: invisibility.
We move now into the sixth law of power, the principle of strategic magnetism. The common man, driven by a primal fear of judgment, seeks to blend in. He values humility, privacy, and fitting in, believing that by staying out of the spotlight, he is safe from the arrows of his enemies. This is a profound biological delusion. In the arena of power, to be unseen is to be non-existent. If the world does not see you, it cannot respect you, it cannot fear you, and it certainly cannot follow you. The sovereign understands that attention is the lifeblood of authority. You must draw the world's eye towards your frequency, ensuring that you are the brightest, most solid object in the social grid. You do not wait for the spotlight to find you. You engineer the environment so that the spotlight has no choice but to illuminate your presence. The first pillar of this law is the rejection of the humble mirage. Humility is often a mask for mediocrity. The amateur hides his light because he is afraid of the cortisol pressure that comes with being watched. He doesn't want the responsibility of being the center of gravity. The sovereign, however, realizes that validation is for the weak, but attention is for the strong. You do not court attention for the sake of your ego, you court it for the sake of your territorial expansion. When you are the focus of the room, you own the frame of the room. You dictate the pace, the tone, and the direction of the interaction. By standing out through your aesthetic, your silence, or your sudden, bold actions, you are effectively hijacking the collective consciousness. You have turned the world into your audience, and an audience is always easier to govern than a group of peers. Furthermore, we must address the bio-sovereignty of the scandal. The commoner fears negative attention. He is terrified of gossip, of controversy, and of being misunderstood. This fear makes him predictable and easy to manage. The sovereign, instead, realizes that controversy is a force multiplier. It is better to be slandered and attacked than to be ignored.
When you are the subject of controversy, you are occupying psychological real estate in the minds of others for free. You are forcing your enemies to spend their energy thinking about you. Even a controlled scandal can be used to broadcast your strength and your unapologetic nature. By leaning into a controversy rather than retreating from it, you signal a status immunity that fascinates the masses. You are not a victim of the narrative. You are the architect of the chaos. You realize that the crowd is naturally drawn to the storm, and by being the center of that storm, you ensure your name is etched into the grid with iron ink. This leads us to the strategy of the unreachable mystery. Drawing attention does not mean being loud or obnoxious. That is the behavior of the low-status seeker of approval. The highest form of attention courting is aura-based magnetism. You create a mystery around your person. You reveal just enough to fascinate, but never enough to satisfy. This creates a vacuum of information that the world desperately tries to fill with speculation. By being slightly other, by maintaining a specific aesthetic excellence, and by refusing to explain your motivations, you become a living enigma. People will watch you simply to see what you will do next. You have turned your presence into an event. This is the gravity of the unknown. When people cannot categorize you, they cannot dismiss you. You have mastered the sixth law when your silence draws more attention than another man's shout. Moreover, we must understand the aesthetic of dominance. In a world of visual noise, your physical projection must be a visual command. The sovereign does not dress for comfort. He dresses for psychological impact. You choose an image that is sharp, consistent, and slightly intimidating. This is your visual anchor. When you enter a space, your appearance should immediately stop the clock for everyone else. You are not just another person in the room. You are a different category of being. This visual distinction serves as a preemptive strike against anyone who would try to treat you as an equal. You have used the physics of light and form to secure your status before a single word has been spoken. You have courted the eye, and once you have the eye, the mind will inevitably follow.
To master the sixth law of power, you must navigate the dangerous narrow path between the sovereign legend and the desperate clown. The common man, in his hunger for attention, often falls into the trap of status anxiety. He tries too hard to be noticed, making loud gestures, wearing overly flamboyant clothes, or constantly interrupting others to prove his presence. This is a biological signal of submission. It tells the hierarchy that you are hungry for validation, and in the world of the elite, hunger is a sign of weakness. The sovereign, instead, practices calculated spectacle. Your attention courting is never a plea for approval. It is an exercise of authority. You do not perform for the audience. You allow the audience to witness your manifestation. Every bold move you make must be tethered to a purpose, a strategic gravity that justifies the spotlight. If you draw the world's eye and have nothing but noise to show, you will be branded a fool. But if you draw the eye and reveal a masterpiece of intent, you become a legend. The second pillar of management is the strategy of the sacred monster. This is the ability to become a figure that is both fascinating and slightly transgressive. The commoner follows the rules to stay safe. The sovereign breaks a minor symbolic rule to signal his status immunity. By doing something unexpected, arriving at a formal event in a way that disrupts the conventional flow, or adopting a controversial aesthetic that others are afraid to mimic, you create a cognitive ditch in the minds of the observers. They cannot look away because they are waiting to see if you will be punished by the social grid. When the punishment never comes because you carry yourself with absolute entitlement, your status skyrockets. You have shown that you are above the frame. You are the sacred monster of the organization, someone whose brilliance and presence are so overwhelming that the standard rules of the commoners no longer apply to you. This leads us to the pivot of strategic withdrawal. Once you have successfully courted absolute attention, the final move is to withdraw the light. Attention is a resource governed by the laws of supply and demand. If you are always visible, your value begins to erode through familiarity.
The sovereign understands the physics of the eclipse. After a major public victory or a bold display that has captivated the hierarchy, you must retreat into the shadows. You become unavailable. You stop the content stream. You allow the visual echo of your brilliance to do the work in your absence. This withdrawal creates an attention hunger. People will start to speculate about where you are and what you are building next. By the time you reappear, your presence is treated as a high-status event. You have mastered the cycle of magnetism and mystery, ensuring that the world's eye is always searching for you, even when you are nowhere to be found. Furthermore, we must address the digital arena of fame. In our current era, attention is often measured in metrics. The amateur is a slave to the like and the view, constantly adjusting his frequency to please the algorithm. This is a total surrender of sovereignty. The sovereign treats the digital grid as a broadcasting station for his myth. You do not engage with the masses, you manifest for them. Your digital presence should be a series of high-status signals, consistent, high quality, and echoing the sovereign frequency we built in the previous chapters. You use the digital eye to amplify your physical reality, creating a force multiplier for your reputation. You realize that fame is the ultimate shield. When the world is looking at you, your enemies find it much harder to strike you in the dark. Your visibility is your protection, provided that visibility is governed by elite curation. Finally, we must internalize the physics of the unblinking eye. When you court attention, you will inevitably draw heat. You will face the gaze of envy and the judgment of the mediocre. The commoner retreats when he feels this pressure. He tries to soften his image to appease the critics. The sovereign, instead, maintains an unflinching gaze. You realize that their judgment is just another form of attention. Whether they love you or hate you, they are still locked into your frequency. You use their energy to fuel your ascent. You are the solid object that does not melt under the heat of the spotlight. You have mastered the sixth law not by being a celebrity, but by becoming an inevitable presence. You are the center of the grid, the anchor of the frame, and the visual command that the world cannot ignore. As we conclude this sixth part of the 48 laws, reflect on your acoustic and visual footprint. Are you blending in, or are you stopping the clock? Are you seeking approval, or are you governing the eye? The sovereign realizes that invisibility is the grave of ambition.
Master the sixth law, and you ensure that your name is always the one whispered in the corridors of power. In the next part, we will move to the seventh law. Get others to do the work for you, but always take the credit. We will explore the parasitic excellence of the elite and why the hard worker is often the one who remains at the bottom of the hierarchy. In the brutal economy of the elite, the most precious resource is not money, not talent, and not even influence. It is time. We move now into the seventh law of power, a principle that dictates the biophysics of strategic preservation. The common man is a slave to the myth of the hard worker. He believes that by sweating, grinding, and being the one in the trenches, he is proving his value to the hierarchy. This is a catastrophic biological error. In the arena of power, the man who does the work is a utility tool, but the man who directs the work is the sovereign. To master this law, you must realize that your energy is finite. If you spend it on the labor of the mundane, you will have nothing left for the labor of the vision. You must learn to harvest the brilliance, the effort, and the hours of others, ensuring that while the world does the heavy lifting, your name remains the only one etched into the final masterpiece. The first pillar of this law is the neutralization of the martyr complex. Why do people insist on doing everything themselves? It is a cortisol-driven insecurity. They are afraid that if they don't do the work, they won't be needed, or they are so obsessed with perfection that they cannot delegate. This makes them a bottleneck of power. The sovereign, however, possesses the confidence of the architect. You realize that an architect does not lay the bricks, he provides the frame in which the bricks must exist. By getting others to do the work for you, you are effectively borrowing their lifespan. You are adding their years of experience and their hours of labor to your own timeline. This is the ultimate force multiplier. You are not just one man, you are a synthesizer of collective effort. Your value lies not in your activity, but in your direction. Furthermore, we must address the lethality of the anonymous laborer. History does not remember the thousands of workers who built the pyramids, it remembers the pharaoh. The world is naturally designed to attribute the result to the source of authority. When you allow others to do the work while you maintain the status position, you are aligning yourself with the natural physics of human perception. The amateur feels guilty about taking credit. He wants to share the glory to be fair. This fairness leak is a total surrender of sovereignty. If you share the credit, you dilute your aura.
You must realize that the credit is the only part of the work that has permanent status value. The labor disappears the moment it is finished, but the credit becomes part of your reputational shield. To be a sovereign is to be the collector of brilliance. You let others be the vines, but you are the wine. This leads us to the strategy of the standing on giants. You do not need to reinvent the wheel. You only need to own the wheel. Many of the most powerful figures in history were not original creators, but master curators. They took the half-finished ideas, the raw data, and the unpolished brilliance of those around them and gave it a sovereign frame. They provided the aura that turned a simple idea into a global event. The sovereign understands that research and development are high-cost, high-risk activities. You let the ambitious amateurs take those risks. You watch them, you learn from their failures, and when they finally hit a vein of gold, you move in to provide the refinery. You have turned their life's work into a chapter of your own legend. This is not theft, it is strategic harvesting. You are the one who knows what to do with the gold. Therefore, the gold belongs to you. Moreover, we must understand the bio-sovereignty of the managerial gaze. When you are the one doing the work, your visual field is narrowed to the task at hand. You are reactive. But when you get others to do the work, your gaze remains elevated. You can see the entire grade of power. You can anticipate threats, identify opportunities, and adjust the strategy in real time. This elevated perspective is what keeps you at the top of the hierarchy. By refusing to get your hands dirty with the minutia, you maintain your acoustic and visual stillness. You are the still center of the operation. The room perceives you as the source of wisdom because you are the only one who isn't panting from the effort. Your presence is defined by effortless dominance. You have mastered the seventh law because you have realized that the crown is too heavy to be worn by someone who is still busy digging the foundation. To master the seventh law of power, you must develop the clinical precision of a sovereign siphon.
This is the ability to extract the life force and brilliance of others while leaving the friction of labor behind. The common man, in his insecurity, often feels threatened by people more talented than himself. He tries to suppress them or compete with them. This is a low-status biological response. The sovereign, instead, treats talent as a utility node. If you find someone who is a genius in a specific field, you do not fear their intellect, you enclose it. You provide the resources, the protection, and the high-status environment that allows them to produce their best work. But you ensure that the final gateway of that work is your own approval. You are the one who translates their specialized labor into a language the world understands. In this way, the world credits you for the result, while the laborer remains a footnote in the shadow of your empire. A critical maneuver in this law is the protocol of the smart assistant. As you rise, you will inevitably hire researchers, writers, and strategists. The amateur tries to look like a leader of a team. The sovereign looks like a singular force of nature. You must never let the world see the machinery behind your success. When you present a project, a video, or a deal, you present it as a manifestation of your internal vision. You do not say, "My team worked hard on this." You say, "This is the standard I have established." By absorbing the collective intelligence of your associates into your own personal brand, you create an aura of inhuman capacity. People begin to wonder how one man can know so much and do so much. This mystery of productivity is what creates your gravitational pull. You are not stealing their work, you are branding it. Without your sovereign frame, their work would be fragmented and meaningless noise. You provide the structural soul that gives the labor its value. Furthermore, we must address the bio-sovereignty of energy conservation. In the high-stakes digital grid of 2026, there is a constant pressure to be busy. The world celebrates the hustle, the high cortisol state of constant motion. The sovereign realizes that hustle is the language of the servant. If you are always busy, you are always reactive. By getting others to do the work, you maintain a low resting pulse. You are the only one in the organization who has the cognitive surplus to think 3 steps ahead. This is the testosterone of perspective. While your utility tools are exhausted by the details, you are fresh, calm, and ready to strike at the moment of peak opportunity. You have mastered Law 7 when your inactivity becomes more productive than another man's hyperactivity. You are the still brain that governs the working hands. Moreover, the sovereign understands the strategy of the expert harvest. You do not need to spend 10 years learning a complex skill if you can hire someone who has already spent those 10 years. This is temporal arbitrage. You are effectively buying time on the open market. When you use an expert's knowledge to solve a problem, you do not introduce them as the savior, you introduce them as a consultant to your vision. You frame their expertise as a tool you have chosen to deploy. This maintains the hierarchy. You are the one who knows which tool to use, which is a higher status skill than being the tool. You have turned their decades of sacrifice into a 5-minute demonstration of your own strategic wisdom. You are the general who takes the city, not the sapper who dug the tunnel. The history books and the boardrooms only care about the man who holds the flag at the end. This law is particularly lethal in the digital empire of content. In the modern arena, originality is a myth for the naive. True power lies in synthesis and distribution. You can use AI, ghostwriters, and researchers to create massive amounts of high-status content, but the voice, the frame, and the aura must be yours alone. You are the chief curator of reality. When the world consumes the content, they must feel your presence, not the algorithm or the freelancer behind it. You have turned the labor of the crowd into the monologue of the monarch. By being the final filter for everything that bears your name, you ensure that your sovereign frequency remains pure and undiluted. You are the sun around which all other utility nodes revolve. Finally, we must internalize the physics of the invisible hand. The ultimate expression of Law 7 is when the world believes you are doing nothing, yet everything is being done perfectly. This is transcendental efficiency. You move through the world with a predatory grace, appearing relaxed and unburdened, while behind the scenes, a machine of others is building your monuments.
You do not seek the dopamine of being seen working. You seek the sovereignty of the final result.
You have mastered the seventh law, not because you are lazy, but because you are strategically saturated. You have realized that the most powerful thing you can do with your hands is to keep them clean, while others use theirs to build your throne. As we conclude this seventh part of the 48 laws, look at your to-do list. How much of it is sovereign labor, and how much of it is utility labor? Who are the giants you are standing on? The sovereign realizes that effort is a status leak. Results are a status anchor. Master the seventh law, and you ensure that your empire grows, even while you sleep. In the next part, we will move to the eighth law. Make other people come to you. Use bait if necessary. We will explore the gravity of the center, and why the man who chases is a man who has already lost his crown. In the cold biological calculus of the elite, movement is a signal of status. He who moves the most is often the one who owns the least. We move now into the eighth law of power, the principle of gravitational sovereignty. The common man is a chaser. He pursues opportunities, he chases clients, and he runs after the validation of those he deems superior. This frantic movement is a high cortisol status leak. It tells the hierarchy that you are the one in need, and in the arena of power, need is a scent that attracts predators and repels respect. The sovereign, however, understands that true power is a stationary force. You do not move toward the world. You force the world to reorganize itself around your location. By making others come to you, you are asserting that your space is the primary reality. You are the anchor, and everyone else is merely floating until they tether themselves to your frequency. The first pillar of this law is the neutralization of the reactive urge. Why is it so effective to make others come to you? Because the person who travels to another's territory has already made a preemptive submission. They have spent their time, their energy, and their biological capital to reach you. By the time they arrive, they are in a state of adaptive stress. They are in your office, on your terms, and breathing your air. You, however, are in a state of home-field stillness. You have conserved your energy. You are familiar with every shadow and every advantage of your environment. This territorial edge gives you a psychological dominance that is almost impossible to overcome.
To be a sovereign is to be the center of the grid. You do not attend the meeting, you host the manifestation. Furthermore, we must address the lethality of the bait. People do not move toward you out of charity, they move toward you out of incentive. This is the protocol of the golden hook. To make others come to you, you must provide a bait that appeals to their deepest desires or their most urgent fears. This bait must be so vivid and so attractive that it blinds them to the trap of your authority. The sovereign understands that bait is not a lie, it is a selective reality. You highlight the reward, the access, or the status elevation they will receive by entering your orbit. While they are busy focusing on the bait, you are busy setting the frame. By the time they realize that they have surrendered their autonomy, they are already deep within your territory, and the cost of exit has become too high. This leads us to the bio-sovereignty of energy conservation. Every time you chase someone, you are exhausting your nervous system. You are in a state of high arousal pursuit. The sovereign, instead, practices the predatory wait. You realize that the world is full of low-status energy that is looking for a high-status direction. By remaining still and radiant, you become the only solid object in a sea of liquid identity. This stillness is a testosterone signal. It tells the room that you are so certain of your value that you do not need to move an inch to prove it. This is the gravity of the throne. The throne does not chase the king occupies the throne, and the world bows toward it. You have mastered Law 8 when you realize that your availability is a diminishing asset, but your scarcity is a force multiplier. Moreover, we must understand the psychological attrition of the visitor. When someone comes to you, they are auditing themselves. They are wondering if they look right, if they are speaking correctly, and if they are worthy of your time. This internal self-audit drains their confidence. You, as the sovereign, are the auditor. You sit in your stationary frame and observe their approach. This evaluative gaze from a position of stillness is a powerful psychological weapon. You are not arguing for your status, you are simply witnessing their attempt to reach it.
You have turned the simple act of meeting into a hierarchy-defining event. You are the destination, and their journey to you is their first act of service to your empire.
To reach the final stage of gravitational sovereignty, you must master the biophysics of territorial dominance. When you force an adversary or a partner to come to you, you are not just saving your own time, you are actively degrading their social battery. The act of traveling, navigating traffic, passing through security, and entering an unfamiliar lobby is a series of small, high-cortisol events for the visitor. By the time they stand before you, their nervous system is in a scan and adapt mode. They are subconsciously looking for cues on how to behave in your space. You, meanwhile, are in the parasympathetic peak. You are calm, your heart rate is steady, and your acoustic perimeter is already established. This biological imbalance is the secret foundation of every successful negotiation. You are the still predator, and they are the exhausted prey who walked into your den thinking they were there for a meeting. A critical tactic in this law is the mechanism of the high-status gatekeeper. To make people come to you, you must create a perceived scarcity of your presence. The commoner makes himself too available. He answers every call and agrees to meet anywhere for the sake of networking. This is a status suicide. The sovereign, instead, builds a sanctum of access. You make it difficult to reach you. You require applications, referrals, or proof of value before you grant an audience. This friction is the ultimate bait. Human psychology is wired to value that which is hard to obtain. By making people work to come to you, you have already increased your value in their minds. You have turned a simple interaction into a sovereign privilege. They are no longer coming to talk, they are coming to be admitted into your reality. Furthermore, we must address the lethality of the aggressor's exhaustion. If you are in a conflict, the amateur's instinct is to attack. He wants to bring the fight to the enemy. This is a waste of strategic capital. The sovereign, however, practices defensive magnetism. You take a position of strength and you wait. You use a bait, perhaps a vulnerability that looks real but is actually a trap, to provoke the enemy into moving toward you. As they rush to attack, they are burning their resources, exposing their flanks, and losing their composure. By the time they reach your center, they are depleted. You have won the war without moving a muscle, simply by letting the physics of movement do the work for you. You are the immovable object that watches as the unstoppable force tires itself out against your silence. This leads us to the digital gravity of the brand. In the hyper-connected grid of 2026, coming to you often means consuming your frequency. The commoner is a digital beggar. He posts in other people's comments, begs for shares, and chases trends. The sovereign is a digital lighthouse. You create content and broadcasts that are so dense with value and authority that people have no choice but to seek you out. You don't reach out to clients or followers. You project a signal so powerful that it creates a vacuum in the market that only your presence can fill. Your DMs, your inbox, and your platforms become the destination. You have mastered the 8th law when your inbound flow is 100 times greater than your outbound effort. You are the anchor of the algorithm. Moreover, we must master the art of the emotional tether. Sometimes the bait isn't a physical reward, but a psychological need. People are drawn to those who possess absolute certainty and unshakable stillness. In a world of chaos, your sovereign calm is a magnetic force. By remaining still and unreactive, you force others to lean into your frequency. They start coming to you for direction, for validation, and for a sense of reality. You have turned your character into a gravity well. You don't need to chase them. Their own insecurities and the entropy of the world will drive them toward the only solid object they can find, you. You are the center of the social solar system, and they are the planets held in orbit by the weight of your silence. Finally, we must internalize the physics of the throne. A king does not run to his subjects to prove he is a king. He sits on the throne and allows the subjects to prove their loyalty by making the journey. This is the ritual of alignment. Every person who comes to you is subconsciously acknowledging your sovereignty. You must accept this as a natural law, not with arrogance, but with the heavy entitlement of a monarch. You have mastered the 8th law not because you are passive, but because you are strategically saturated. You have realized that the most powerful thing you can do
is to remain.
By staying at the center, you ensure that you are always the one who dictates the terms, the one who owns the frame, and the one who ultimately wins the game of power. As we conclude this 8th part of the 48 laws, reflect on your daily movement. Are you a chaser or an anchor? Who is coming to you, and what bait are you using to draw them? The sovereign realizes that movement is a leak, stillness is a throne. Master the 8th law, and you ensure that the world always comes to you on its knees. In the next part, we will move to the 9th law. Win through your actions, never through argument. We will explore why debate is a status trap and how to use the inevitable result to silence your enemies forever. In the high-stakes theater of power, words are the cheapest form of currency and the most expensive form of status leak. We move now into the 9th law of power, a principle that governs the transition from persuasion to manifestation. The common man is a slave to the linguistic trap. He believes that by arguing, debating, and convincing others of his point of view, he is exercising influence. This is a profound biological and strategic error. In the arena of power, an argument is a high-cortisol, low-status maneuver. It tells the hierarchy that you do not have the power to make it so, and therefore you must ask permission through the medium of debate. The sovereign, however, realizes that action is an axiomatic force. You do not argue for your reality, you simply manifest it. You allow the inevitable result to do the work of silencing your critics. By winning through your actions, you leave no room for resentment, no space for counterarguments, and no doubt about your sovereignty. The first pillar of this law is the neutralization of the argument reflex. Why do people feel the need to argue? It is a primal, ego-driven defensive response. When someone challenges your vision or your methods, your nervous system interprets it as a status attack. The amateur reacts by talking. He wants to prove he is right. But the very act of proving is a submission to the other person's judgment frame. You are essentially saying, "Please evaluate my logic and tell me I am correct." This is the behavior of a supplicant. The sovereign, however, possesses the internal stillness to let the challenge hang in the air. You do not waste your acoustic capital on someone whose mind cannot be changed by words. You realize that a verbal victory is a hollow triumph. It leaves the other person feeling inferior and resentful, which creates a long-term envy debt. A victory through action, however, is indisputable. It is a solid object in a world of shadows. Furthermore, we must address the bio-sovereignty of the manifested result. Human beings are biologically hardwired to respect outcomes over ideas. An idea is a maybe, an outcome is a fact. When you argue, you are staying in the realm of the maybe. You are engaging the other person's rational mind, which is designed to find flaws and inconsistencies. But when you perform an action that produces a massive, undeniable result, you bypass the rational mind and strike the primitive brain. The primitive brain respects strength, competence, and inevitability. This is the demonstration protocol. Instead of explaining why your strategy is superior, you execute the strategy and present the results. The silence that follows a successful demonstration is the sound of absolute sovereignty. You have not just won a debate, you have recalibrated the reality of everyone in the room. This leads us to the lethality of the silence during conflict. In the middle of a disagreement, the most powerful thing you can do is to stop talking. The commoner interprets your silence as a lack of defense, but the elite realize it is a gathering of storm clouds. While the other person is busy exhausting their linguistic ammunition, you are focused on the labor of the move. You are moving the pieces, securing the resources, and preparing the strike of reality. When you finally present the finished work, the other person's previous arguments look petty and irrelevant. You have used their own noise as a distraction for your signal. You have mastered Law 9 when you realize that every second spent arguing is a second stolen from the production of power. Moreover, we must understand the psychology of resentment. An argument is a personalized conflict. It's your ego versus their ego. Even if you win the logic, you lose the person. They will look for ways to sabotage you later to reclaim their lost status. But a winning action is impersonal. You haven't defeated them, You have simply demonstrated the truth.
The world cannot stay angry at a natural law. By winning through action, you maintain your aura of excellence without the visual friction of a fight. You are the sun that simply shines. You do not argue with the darkness about whether it should exist. You simply manifest the light, and the darkness vanishes. This quiet dominance is what builds a legion of allies who follow you not because you convince them, but because they want to be part of the inevitable success you represent. Finally, we must internalize the physics of the finished frame. The ultimate expression of Law 9 is the unveiling. You work in the sanctum of silence, concealing your intentions, Law 3, and saying less than necessary, Law 4. When the work is complete, you reveal it to the hierarchy. The impact of a sudden, perfect manifestation is a status shock that instantly elevates you. You do not provide a manual or a justification. You let the work stand as its own sovereign statement. You have moved from being a participant in the world to being an architect of the world. You have mastered the 9th law because you have realized that words are for the supplicants, results are for the monarchs. To reach the final stage of sovereign influence, you must master the biophysics of the irrefutable result. The common man spends his life in a state of linguistic friction. He is constantly trying to sell his value, defend his choices, and convince others of his brilliance. This is an exhausting expenditure of biological energy that yields zero permanent status. The sovereign, however, realizes that an argument is a soft target, but a result is a hard fact. When you execute a move that changes the physical or financial reality of the room, you are performing a status hijack. You aren't asking for agreement. You are forcing the environment to synchronize with your frequency. You have moved from the supplicant's debate to the monarch's decree. By winning through your actions, you avoid the resentment debt that always follows a Virgo victory. People don't feel defeated by you, they feel defeated by the truth you have manifested.
A critical tactic in this law is the protocol of the silent demonstration. In the high-stakes professional grid, when a rival challenges your method or your authority, the amateur reacts with a defense speech. He explains his logic, which only provides the rival with more acoustic handles to grab and twist. The sovereign, instead, engages in strategic labor. You do not say a word. You simply go to work. You build the prototype. You secure the deal. Or you solve the problem that everyone said was impossible. When the finished work is placed on the table, it emits a frequency of competence that acts as a psychological muzzle. The silence that follows a successful demonstration is the most powerful acoustic perimeter you can build. It tells the world that while others were talking about the storm, you were building the ship. You have turned your excellence into a sovereign statement that requires no translation. Furthermore, we must address the neurochemistry of the visual win. Human beings are visual predators. We trust what we see far more than what we hear. An argument is processed in the prefrontal cortex, the slow, analytical part of the brain. An action, however, strikes the limbic system and the amygdala. It creates a visceral emotional response of awe and submission. This is the spectacle of inevitability. When you win through action, you are effectively overloading the observer's sensory system. They cannot find a way to argue with the result because the result has already occupied their reality. This is why the sovereign never proposes a vision, he unveils it. The shock of a sudden, perfect manifestation is a status bomb that instantly recalibrates the hierarchy in your favor. This leads us to the armor of the silent achievement. In the common world, people leak their progress. They post updates, they share work-in-progress shots, and they talk about what they plan to do. This is a dopamine siphon that weakens the final impact. The sovereign, instead, practices total opacity until the moment of manifestation. You allow the world to believe you are doing nothing, perhaps even that you are failing. You absorb their skeptical energy and use it as fuel. When you finally deliver the win, the contrast between their expectation and the reality is so massive that it creates a legend effect. They don't just see a success,
They see a miracle of sovereignty. You have mastered Law 9 when you realize that your silence is the incubation chamber for your most lethal victories. Moreover, we must understand the strategy of the impersonal victory. One of the hidden dangers of winning an argument is that you make an enemy. You have proven the other person wrong, which is a direct attack on their biological ego. They will look for ways to sabotage you later to reclaim their lost status. But when you win through action, the defeat is impersonal. You didn't beat the person, you simply outperformed the frame. The rival is forced to bow to the standard of excellence you have established. This allows you to maintain a clean social grid. You can even be magnanimous in your victory, helping the rival to adapt to the new reality you have created. You are not a debater who crushed their feelings. You are a force of nature who showed them the way. This quiet dominance is how you build an empire of allies who follow you out of a desire to be part of your inevitable success. In the digital empire of 2026, this law is your greatest weapon against the noise. The internet is full of arguments, endless threads of people trying to prove they are right. The sovereign does not participate in the comment section wars. Instead, you produce high-status artifacts. You create content that is so polished, so insightful, and so undeniable that it silences the critics through its sheer density of value. You don't argue with your audience about why they should listen to you. You provide a frequency that makes it impossible for them to look away. You have turned your digital sovereignty into a one-way broadcast of power. While others are busy defending their brand, you are busy expanding your empire through the constant production of irrefutable results. Finally, we must internalize the physics of the sovereign finality. The ultimate goal of Law 9 is to become a person whose very presence is a win. You have demonstrated your competence so many times that people stop questioning your moves. They assume that if you are doing it, it is because it is the most effective thing to do. This is the halo of competence. You have moved beyond the need for proof. You are the reference point of reality. You have mastered the 9th law not because you are stubborn, but because you are strategically manifested. You have realized that words are the tools of the supplicant, but actions are the language of the monarch. As we conclude this 9th part of the 48 laws, look at your current conflicts. Where are you wasting your breath? Where are you trying to convince someone who is biologically wired to resist you? The sovereign realizes that an argument is a weakness, a result is a throne. Master the 9th law, and you ensure that your presence is felt as a gravitational force that requires no explanation. In the final part of this manual, we will move to the 10th law, infection, avoid the unhappy and unlucky. We will explore the biosecurity of the inner circle and why bad energy is a contagious disease that can destroy your empire from within. In the rigorous architecture of power, the most lethal threat is often the most invisible, the pathogenic failure of those you allow into your proximity. We move now into the 10th law of power, the principle of vibrational biosecurity. The common man is a slave to a misplaced sense of empathy. He believes that by helping the chronically unhappy, by rescuing the chronically unlucky, and by being the emotional anchor for those in perpetual crisis, he is displaying moral strength. This is a profound biological and strategic delusion. In the arena of power, emotions and misfortunes are as contagious as a viral disease. When you associate with those who are constantly drowning, you do not save them. You simply provide them with a status anchor to pull down with them. The sovereign understands that his bioperimeter is sacred. To master this law, you must realize that vitality is transmissible, but so is destruction. You must learn to filter your inner circle, not just by skill, but by the atmospheric frequency they bring into your empire. The first pillar of this law is the neurochemistry of the mirror neuron. Science and history converge on a brutal truth. Our brains are designed to synchronize with the frequencies of those around us. When you are in the presence of someone who is chronically stressed, anxious, or defeated, your own mirror neurons begin to fire in a similar pattern. You start to absorb their cortisol leakage.
Without realizing it, your own decision-making becomes clouded by their fear. Your sovereign frame begins to warp to accommodate their instability. This is not support, it is biodegradation. The sovereign, however, treats his mental state as a high-value asset. You realize that you cannot build a throne of stillness in a room full of emotional chaos. By distancing yourself from the infectious unhappy, you are not being cold, you are practicing strategic self-preservation. You are protecting the internal clarity required to govern your reality. Furthermore, we must address the myth of the innocent victim. The commoner views misfortune as a random act of the universe. He sees the unlucky as people who just need a break. The sovereign, however, possesses the clinical eye of the predator. You realize that chronic misfortune is almost always a manifested pattern. People who are always in trouble, who always have drama, and who are constantly betrayed are the architects of their own chaos. They possess a self-sabotage frequency that is so strong it bleeds into their environment. If you allow them into your grid, their chaos will inevitably find a way to infect your projects, your reputation, and your peace of mind. You cannot fix a person who is biologically wired for crisis. Your only move is to amputate the connection before the infection reaches your vital organs. In the arena of power, toxic empathy is a status leak that will eventually drown you. This leads us to the strategy of the vitality filter. Just as failure is contagious, so is success and joy. The sovereign seeks out those who are natural winners, people whose presence raises the testosterone and dopamine levels in the room. This is the frequency alignment protocol. When you surround yourself with the happy and the lucky, you are effectively hacking your environment. Their optimism, their decisiveness, and their winner's gaze become part of your own subconscious map. You don't have to try to be powerful. The collective energy of your inner circle makes power your baseline. This is why the elite are so selective about who they allow into their sanctum. They aren't looking for yes men, they're looking for vitality nodes who strengthen the sovereign field. By associating with the vibrant, you ensure that your empire is built on a foundation of growth, not on the shifting sands of others' misery. Moreover, we must understand the lethality of the sob story. The infectious unlucky are masters of the emotional hook. They use their tragedies to bypass your status defense. They want to trigger your guilt and draw you into their reactive frame. The amateur falls for the hook, believing that by being there for them, he is earning loyalty credit. But the infectious have no loyalty. They only have a need for consumption. They will consume your time, your energy, and your capital until you have nothing left, and then they will move on to the next host, blaming you for their continued failure. The sovereign recognizes the pattern of the parasite. You listen to the sob story not with sympathy, but with evaluative distance. You ask, is this a temporary setback, or is this a permanent frequency? If it's the latter, you exit the interaction with surgical speed. You do not owe anyone the destruction of your own empire for the sake of their comfort. Finally, we must internalize the physics of the inner sanctuary. Your home, your war room, and your digital circle are the cradles of your sovereignty. If these spaces are occupied by infectious energy, your throne is compromised. The sovereign practices vigilant biosecurity. You do not allow negative noise to penetrate your perimeter. You choose your associates based on their functional utility, Law 7, and their vibrational health. You realize that a lucky associate with average skills is 1,000 times more valuable than a brilliant associate who is a magnet for disaster.
You have mastered Law 10 when you realize that your atmosphere is the ultimate product of your sovereignty. By curating a world of vibrance and success, you ensure that your presence is always a force multiplier and never a target for the diseased. To reach the pinnacle of strategic dominance, you must develop the clinical capacity for emotional amputation. The common man is a slave to sentiment debt.
He feels a biological obligation to maintain ties with old friends, relatives, or associates who supported him in his moments of weakness, even if they have now become anchors dragging down his vision. This is the consistency trap. The sovereign, however, realizes that growth requires shedding. If you do not purge your perimeter of the failure carriers, you are not helping them. You are simply providing them with a platform to infect your reality. In this final section, we will dissect the amputation protocol, how to sever toxic ties without creating unnecessary friction, and how to reprogram your social immune system to act as a magnet for high-vitality nodes. The first pillar of this protocol is the strategy of the quiet withdrawal. When you identify an infectious individual in your inner circle, the amateur's mistake is to trigger a direct confrontation or attempt to fix the person. Confrontation is a status leak. It provides the infected individual with another opportunity to siphon your attention and emotional energy. The sovereign, instead, practices atmospheric cooling. You begin to withdraw the emotional subsidy you have been providing. Your responses become shorter, your availability decreases, and your interest in their drama cycles drops to zero. You aren't attacking them, you are simply making your frequency incompatible with theirs. Eventually, the parasite will realize that you are no longer a source of emotional nutrition, and they will drift away to find a host that matches their low-status vibration. You have successfully amputated the connection without leaving a surgical scar on your reputation. Furthermore, we must address the engineering of vitality nodes. Once the space is cleared, you must engage in elite selection. Sovereignty does not mean isolation, it means curation. You seek out individuals who possess an aura of luck, which is usually a byproduct of high discipline and clear vision. When you associate with a winner, your mirror neurons begin to synchronize with their low cortisol, high dopamine state.
This is not just networking, it is a biological upgrade. The sovereign does not choose associates based on social comfort, but based on strategic alignment. You want an environment that forces you to ascend, a grid where failure is seen as a biological anomaly rather than the norm. You are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. If their status weight is 0, you will remain grounded no matter how hard you try to fly. Moreover, we must internalize the digital biosecurity of the grid. In the year 2026, infection is not just transmitted through a handshake, it is transmitted through the screen. Your social immune system must extend to your digital perimeter. If your feeds are filled with complainers, victims, and the infectious unhappy, you are effectively injecting yourself with failure every time you unlock your phone. The sovereign practices digital purge. Your algorithm should be a reflection of your ambition, not your sympathy. Every account you follow must be a power signal. You do not consume content, you feed on it. If a piece of information does not elevate your sovereign frequency, it is a virus that must be deleted. You are building a digital shield that prevents the noise of the weak from reaching your internal war room. The final pillar is the manifestation of the sovereign atmosphere. Your environment, your office, your home, and your inner circle is the cradle of your legend. If this space is contaminated by infectious energy, your throne is compromised. You must be the vigilant warden of your own peace. You realize that a lucky associate with average skills is more valuable than a brilliant associate who is a magnet for catastrophe. You have mastered Law 10 when you realize that your vibe is your most profitable product. By curating a world of vitality and success, you ensure that your presence is always a force multiplier. You have moved from being a recipient of fate to being the architect of your own fortune. The final summary of the manual, the Sovereign OS.
With the completion of this 10th law, we have successfully built your sovereign operating system. We began with never outshining the master to secure your survival, and we conclude with avoiding the unhappy to secure your purity. These laws are not moral advice, they are the physical laws of power. Sovereignty is a state of internal stillness amidst a storm of strategic action. The world does not grant power to the deserving, but to those who command it through the control of information, reputation, and presence. You now possess the blueprint to transform from a participant in reality into the architect of reality. Go forth into the arena and apply these principles with a cold, calculated grace. Let your reputation precede you as an iron shield. Let your silence be heavier than others' words, and let your results be the only proof that matters. Your empire is not built in a day, but it is built in every moment you choose sovereignty over submission. Would you like me to generate a script for the next 10 laws of power for the audiobook Empire channel, Mateo?